Yo guys, what's up? It's been a while since we had a tier list on Warcraft 3 and I'm going to be doing a big one that I've never done before, and I'm not just approaching this from a place of expertise about Warcraft 3, but I'm also going to be discovering some of it myself, because Warcraft 3 has a very wide spectrum of different units from different mercenary camps. You see, Blizzard created lots of different tile sets and all of them have their own proprietary mercamp. While you may be most used to the classical 4 mercenaries, the Ogre Mauler, the Mud Golem, the Forest Troll Berserker, and the Troll Shadow Priest, other tile sets and other biomes actually have really different units, and we're going to be checking them out. I have summoned the resource costs of hiring them, the cooldowns of when they become available, and we're going to be ranking each of them by how strong we think they are in a game. Our main metric that we're going to be using is, would I buy this? Would I buy this early game? Would I buy this later on, etc.? So let's get started. These are some of the mercamps that exist on different tile sets. You've got the Ashenvale, the Barrens, Dungeon, Dalaran, Felwood, Icecrown, Glacier, and the most common one is Lordaeron Summer. Before we go on though, I should do a little preface. Mercenary camps have certain advantages and disadvantages, and I've done some testing and research to prove whether my erstwhile theories are correct. Because what is a mercenary camp at its base? It is a doodad where you can interact with it in a melee game of Warcraft 3, and it will offer extra unit production. There is no production time at all, just a cooldown of when units become available, and then you can hire the unit instantly and it will join your army, provided you have the supply to fit it into your army. So this can offer extra utility or emergency reinforcements right when you need it. My theory always was, because of the benefit of immediately being able to hire a unit from the mercamp, provided that you either clear the creeps that are defending that mercenary camp, which is of course a threshold that you need to be able to cross, or you pull the creeps away from the mercenary camp in order to be able to hire some units from the mercamp quickly. Because of this advantage of being able to hire units instantly, I always figured they're probably going to be slightly more costly or less effective than standard racial units on average. Of course, every of the 4 races in Warcraft 3 has its own strengths and weaknesses, so sometimes some of these units can cover a weakness. For instance, Undead doesn't get Dispel magic until tier 3 with Obsidian Destroyers. But then the Troll Shadow Priest can come out with Abolish as early as 1 minute into the game, so obviously that is going to be a cover for one of the weaknesses that you might otherwise have. But on average I expected them to be expensive, so I did some testing. So my theory was that you're paying extra money for an immediate advantage at the cost of value for bang. But this theory is not as obvious as I thought. I ended up comparing units that are very similar to one another, one a racial unit and another a mercenary unit. For example, the Ogre Mauler is very similar to a Grunt. They are similar in HP and utility, and then the Forest Troll Berserker is very similar to a Rifleman. And I figured the racial units are going to be better value, and so they're going to be better in general, but they have a production time and not every race has access to those. So I went to test it out. Example 1, you've got an Ogre Mauler that is 300 gold. He costs 4 population, 850 HP. He's got 3 armor, which means he has 1000 physical effective health. He deals 24 to 27 damage at a 1.35 second attack cooldown, so his DPS is about 19. You take a Grunt that's 50% cheaper, only 200 gold. He has 875 physical effective health and a DPS of 14. When you compare those, you can see, okay, the Ogre Mauler costs 50% more gold. He has 15% more physical effective HP, but he also has 34% more DPS and he has 33% more supply cost. Overall, I would say that if you have Grunts with brute strength, they're probably better than Ogre Maulers. But if you don't have brute strength, then this is 100 or 125 less HP, this is 3 damage less, and then an Ogre Mauler is probably a better purchase. This is not considering the production time, which is of course already an advantage that mercs always have. Then we go to look at the Forest Troll Berserker and we can see 245 gold. They have a physical effective health that's a little lower than a Rifleman with long rifle upgrade. The range is 500 against 600. DPS is higher with 20 against about 16. And so the Troll Berserker, you pay 20% more gold to hire them, the same lumber. They have a little bit less health against physical attacks. They have 100 less range, and they have 30% more DPS. So then I think, well, actually, after rifles get 600 range, they get plus 200 from the range upgrade. Rifles are probably better. They don't deal as much damage, which is probably king when it comes to ranged, but they are a lot more sturdy and they have more range. And so overall, at least in these examples, I would say that the differences aren't that great between them. And the racial units really start to shine once you start factoring in blacksmith and war mill upgrades, which mercenaries will never have access to. So as a summary, the way that we should see mercenaries, at least based on these two examples, is that they hire very fast, they're relatively competitive with baseline units that races can get, and you can hire what you need exactly when you need it. With that said, without further ado, let's jump into it. Alright, let's begin with the first Mercamp. If this Mercamp would be on a standard one-on-one melee competitive map, which of these mercs would be really valuable purchases and where would they rank on the tier list? So we're going to be starting things off with the Dark Troll Shadow Priest. His cast is 175, which is slightly higher than a racial caster unit like the Sorceress, the Witch Doctor, the Shaman and the Priest. Let's see what toolkit he brings. He's 10 lumber, which is slightly cheaper than most casters will be, and at 2 population he's exactly like a caster. He'll be available 2 minutes into the game, which is roughly when Heroes comes out. And let's see what he does. Let's take a look at his stats. So the Dark Troll Shadow Priest, unlike his green brethren, does not have the Abolish Magic upgrade. He's only got healing. For the rest, he's got the same damage, the same armor. He also has heal, just like the priest. Everything is the same, but he doesn't have Abolish. So he's just worse. This unit is pretty good for healing, but we mostly get him for Abolish. We'll end up giving a relatively high rating to Forest Troll Shadow Priest. The Dark Troll Shadow Priest is so much worse by comparison. In terms of his raw damage output, it's not too bad. You can see that he has quite a slow attack, but his very low health count makes him a very easy target to take down. Do you sometimes want to hire him if you play on a map like this, on an Ashenvale Mercenary Camp? You probably want to get him sometimes. But it's as much of a weakness hiring this guy as it would be to purchase a Ritual Dagger as undead. Relatively expensive and cost inefficient, but sometimes good. So I'm going to give him a pretty middling grade on my tier list. I can't give him tier S, which is always get. This creep is broken. You always want to hire this mercenary, even if you have a fully upgraded army. He's definitely not useless either. Useless creeps, I would say tier D is something where I would recommend never ever buy this. But he's neither optimal always, nor is he just good to fill out armies. You would only get him when you need healing. That's a tier C. Alright, let's go for the next one. The next one is going to be the Giant Wolf. At 215 gold and 3 food, he's extremely comparable to a Grunt. A Grunt is 200 gold and 3 food, so we're going to be comparing him mostly to a Grunt, while keeping in mind, of course, that not every race has access to a Grunt. The Giant Wolf comes in with a relatively fast attack damage, attack rate, 18 to 21 damage, 2 armor. With 2 armor, he has 1 more armor than a Grunt, but with 550 health, he's got far less health than a Grunt. Grunt is going to have 7 to 825 health, and this is only 550. He's more expensive than a Grunt, but he does have a chance to do double damage with a 20% chance. Overall, Giant Wolf is a little low in the health department for a melee unit. He is relatively fast. I'm looking at this, and I would say he has the same movement speed as a Demon Hunter and a Blade Master. That is solid. I think you might sometimes want to hire a Giant Wolf in order to harass enemy workers. In a mid-game situation where you both have an expansion and the opponent hasn't made any towers in his expansion, I think it's going to be pretty good to hire this, put it there and start harassing workers. Sometimes we do the same thing with ghouls or a knight or with a goblin shredder even that has served his purpose of gathering enough lumber. So a Giant Wolf could fill this purpose, but overall I feel like he's going to be a little weak in normal fights. And I think a human most likely isn't going to spend resources on this, except when sometimes doing like a mercenary spam flood in order to do a fast expand and then hire a bunch of mercs to try and cancel the enemy expansion. I don't think he's as weak as a tier C, by the way. I could see hiring this from time to time. It's a pretty close toss-up between tier C and tier B, but overall heavy armor melee is not the best thing in this game. You usually need more than just tankiness and damage. Look at the usefulness of footmen and grunts and taurens and abominations in the mid to late game. Usually they're not the go-to units in Warcraft 3, so I'm going to put him either at high C or at low B, and I will be putting him in tier C actually. Next up, we got the Dark Troll Berserker, the exact same price, and supposedly, I would imagine, the exact same functionality as a Forest Troll Berserker from the Green Camp. Yep. So this unit, as we already showed, is very competitive with a Rifleman. At 500 range, it has more range than an unupgraded rifle. And this guy has big DPS. With a 20 ranged piercing DPS, this is a hotly contested unit between players on pretty much every map that has Mercenary Camp. Undeads tend to not hire this, but orcs routinely get this to fill out their army, as orcs generally have a lot of melee via grunts and raiders, and their heroes or summons or mirror image. And this is just a really great backline to help do some extra damage. I think this might be a tier A or S. I'm not going to say S because he doesn't absolutely change the course of a game like some units that have special abilities. So I think this is a great example of a tier A unit that you can add pretty much to any army and be really happy with. So he's going to go over there. Next up and last from the Ashenvale Mercenary Camp, Satyr Shadow Dancer. This will be a little exploratory look as well, because this is not something I've played a whole lot with. The Satyr Shadow Dancer has a cost of 200 gold, 20 wood and 2 food, but he'll only become available 440 seconds into the game. So we will only consider this unit as a late game addition. Now, Satyr Shadow Dancer is pretty cheap. At 2 food, he has Shadow Melt capabilities, which means at night he will turn invisible when standing still. He's got no armor from the medium type, so the same as an archer. And then he has 23 to 27 damage. Pretty cool voice line and attack animation. His attack speed is really quite slow. It says average, but it feels very cumbersome and slow. So not nearly the same as a Forest Troll Berserker. Actually, it's pretty similar, right? A little slower than a Forest Troll Berserker. Alright. So his DPS, therefore, is probably around 14 or so, whereas the Dark Troll Berserker is 20. And then he has 340 health, which is, again, 110 less than the Berserker. His range is 600, which is 100 more, which is kind of cool. But it really comes down to this curse. With a 300 mana pool and a 40 mana curse, he can apply a 33% miss chance that lasts for 30 seconds. That's a little shorter than the Banshee curse duration, but that is a very powerful effect. And I could definitely see you hiring this and mostly using it for autocast curse and not really trying to use it for maximum damage. Its high range keeps it out of range of some threats, provided that the enemy doesn't have speedy engage on top of him. I think this is quite useful to get against Blade Master and Demon Hunter in particular. Demon Hunter, of course, has immolation and mana burn threats that do not rely on physical attacks, but Demon still has fantastic auto attacks, and so does Blade. You could get this maybe against the Mountain King, but Human usually has quite a bit of Dispel. Overall, I think this is a pretty okay unit. I'm gonna say it is pretty competitively priced. It comes out late, and therefore I'm gonna be putting this at tier B. If you can get this, I see this as quite a good addition, especially since at that point in the game people are already quite advanced in the hero levels, so you'll most likely be shutting down enemy melee heroes with a curse that will prevent quite a bit of damage. Moving on to the second mercenary camp, we've got the Barrens Mercenary Camp. There's the Centaur Archer, the Quillboar Hunter, the Centaur Outrunner, and the Harpy Wind Witch. Let's start with the Centaur Archer. At 150 gold and 10 lumber, it is most comparable to an archer who has the same cost but is 130 gold instead. Let's take a look at the Centaur Archer. The Centaur Archer has 300 health, which is slightly more than an archer sitting at 245 health. But unlike the archer, it doesn't have Elun's Grace, which is an archer passive that allows them to take less magical and less piercing damage. The range is 500, which is the same as an unupgraded archer, but the archer eventually becomes 700 with an upgrade. It's quite fast, much faster than an archer. I think this is probably 320 movement speed. I can take a small sneak peek in the Liquipedia. His movement speed is 350 actually. Oh wow, this is faster than a Blade Master or a Demon Hunter. As fast as a Huntress and a Raider, I suppose. Very, very fast. And then the damage. It has an average attack speed with 1720 piercing. Overall, I must admit, I can't really see a reason for this unit to ever be hired. Yes, he's quite cheap, but he's extremely vulnerable. Doesn't have Archer's advantage of extreme range, hiding, and high damage. Movement speed is not as much called for, and I can't see situations where you get an army of these guys and start running around and trying to do some kind of piercing run-bys. The thing is, fast units, like if you had a really fast unit, it makes a lot of sense for that to be a knight, because then you can harass workers and run away. It makes sense for it to be a raider, but I don't really see this being very good. Like, yeah, you could run down wyverns, but then he doesn't have enough damage to really make it stick, and he'll die in a single shot from anything. So, yeah, I can't see a reason anyone would ever want to hire this. The Centaur Archer, regrettably, will be the first tier D unit. Next up is going to be the Quillboar Hunter. The Quillboar Hunter is a unit that has evasion. His cast is 215 gold, 20 wood, and 2 food. That makes him relatively similar to a Rifleman. Rifleman is 205/30. So we'll be mostly comparing this guy to a Rifleman. Let's see what he can be. So the Quillboar Hunter is 21 to 25 piercing damage with a 500 range. A pretty slow attack speed. And then he has 1 armor, only 375 health. And he does have evasion, which is pretty cool. The evasion basically gives him a higher physical effective health. Still not as much as a rifle. He is of course only 2 food, which makes him a bit easier to fit into armies. But I gotta say that especially magic resistance is very valuable on ranged units because of their low health. And that makes this unit just really easy to kill with Chain Lightning, Shockwave, Frost Nova, Coil, etc. He is only 2 food, which is nice, but very expensive then. 215 gold for 2 food is it's a lot of gold per food. So he is supply efficient, but he's very weak against spells, and because of that, I don't think he's very good. I'm gonna put this guy in tier C. I don't see a reason why I would want to be adding this guy to my army, especially since his damage isn't that high. He's got an attack speed cooldown of 1.6, which is slow, relatively middling damage, and the evasion is not going to be the winning factor into hiring this guy. Then you get a pretty interesting Centaur Outrunner at 195 gold and 3 food. That's pretty much the same cast as a Grunt. This unit is 550 health, 1 more armor than a Grunt, has 250 health less than an upgraded Hunt, just about. He has 275 less HP than a upgraded Grunt, and his damage is like an unupgraded Grunt, but he's very fast. So although I think his value isn't very good in terms of his damage and health, what is pretty nice is that he's fast. So I could see myself getting this. This unit becomes available at 220 seconds into the game. That's still before the second hero comes out. That's roughly when you'd be about level 2 with your hero. And this could be a pretty good body blocker. With 550 health and 2 armor, he could body block enemy heroes so that they can't get away. He could start chasing down archers. I like this one quite a bit. I think it's cool. 195 gold is not such a high price to pay. I could see myself getting this sometimes, whichever race I am. Maybe not as undead, but they work a bit differently. They like being able to coil units. We're going to be putting him in tier B. His movement speed allows him to be useful, even if his raw stats aren't that good. He's good at harassing workers and then getting away. He can hunt down and chase down footmen, archers, etc. So I think he's pretty cool. Next up, we've got a flying unit. It's the Harpy Wind Witch. More expensive than a Crypt Fiend, same lumber, only 2 food, but a lot of gold with 240 gold. Becomes available at 440 seconds into the game. Let's see what she can do. Because she's a flying, I expect her to be pretty weak in terms of stats. And she is. Oh my god. 280 health. 0 armor. 23 to 27 damage. And her range is 600. Which honestly is pretty good. Has a cool looking attack. And then she has got Fairy Fire. Which is neat. Because she can give vision. And reduce armor. -4 armor. That's going to be a drop of 24% effective health on their physical health. Which is pretty cool. Sick voice lines as well. Who wouldn't want to hear that all the time while you're harassing things? Because she's flying and gives Fairy Fire, I think she's very good. It's pretty easy to keep this alive despite her low health. This is going to be a great focus fire tool on enemy heroes. If you've got a faster hero than the enemy and you go get boots of speed, you hire one of these and you Fairy Fire their hero, it's very strong. And even outside of a direct fight, skirting around the edges of forests and just casting a Fairy Fire on things, I think it's going to be pretty sick. Oh my god, it's war. Hold on, hold position. Hold it. Oh, stop. Holy shit. So I think Harpy Wind Witch is very useful. I would probably put her at tier A. Being able to Fairy Fire on demand and focus high value units while trying to keep her alive from great range, I think it's very valuable. That's going to be a tier A for me. She's pretty expensive, but that late in the game I think vision is very, very useful and important anyway. Alright, that's the Harpy Wind Witch, and that's the conclusion of the Barrens Mercenary Camp. Let's go over to Dalaran. Dalaran is going to be coming with the Rogue, the Assassin, the Geomancer, and the Troll Priest. We get this tile set Mercenary Camp sometimes in 4-on-4 or FFA maps. Usually looks like a city. It usually looks like Dalaran. Let's check out the units. I have more experience with this camp than some of the others, so I've got pretty strong opinions on most of these. The Assassin is very good. The Rogue, really not that good. The Geomancer and the Priest are very useful as well, so I'm expecting those to get high grades. Let's jump into the game and take a look. So you've got the Rogue, who has the Shadow Melt ability, but he's a 2-pop 150 gold unit that is essentially just a little bit better than a Ghoul or a Footman. Footmen gain defense, Ghouls eventually can harvest lumber, they can be very fast. I don't see a lot of reason ever to get this. I've always been disappointed when I did get him. He's got very little damage. I really don't like it. I would not get this guy. Rogue is going to be a tier D. I just would really rather spend my gold on anything else. Next up is gonna be the Assassin. The Assassin is a ranged unit that has a 260 gold cost, 3 population, and 30 lumber. Becomes available at 220 seconds into the game. That's a pretty hefty price tag, more than a Crypt Fiend or a rifle, while being the same lumber and the same population. But he has one very special thing. He's got Envenomed Weapons. Deal 2 poison damage per second, lasts 20 seconds. So you're telling me that I'm doing 40 damage with a single hit? Ain't no way, brother. Say it ain't so. That is insane. If you start spreading damage, that is a lot of damage. I really like what he brings to the table. I think this unit is fantastic. And the moment where you hire it, it is actually nighttime. Because it is nighttime, you'll be able to Shadow Melt, and he just offers this huge micro advantage. In the early small scale battles, you can hide from enemy attacks and then spread poison. He's very likely going to survive. Eventually, if you're elf, you'll save him as well with Staff of Preservation. Orcs will speed scroll and heal solve them. I really think this is an amazing unit. The only question is, should I give him tier S or tier A? I think it's a tier S unit. I think it's super broken. Just the sheer damage output that he has, I think it's a game-winning type of unit. Imagine like kind of in a similar situation and one of you gets this or 2 of it and then you attack the other. I think it's insane. Next up, Kobold Geomancer. This is, by the way, a crack squad of mercenaries. It's crazy. The Kobold Geomancer brings the very valuable Abolish Magic, just like the Forest Troll Shadow Priest, and also has slow. So this is a priest and a sorceress in one. Yes, it has low health and it has no armor and it does pretty good damage from far away, so it can stay at range if you do auto attack with it. But that is an insane combination. It will require good control, just like the Mud Golem. Now, if I told you that the Shadow Priest is very good because of Abolish, but only has 240 health, and the Mud Golem is very good, even though it only has 240 health because it has slow, then how good do you think the Geomancer is, which freaking has both? The exact same level slow, the exact same level Abolish magic. This unit is insane. And because of that, we have another unit in tier S from the same mercenary camp. The cost? What is the cost? 215, which is criminal. This unit should be 285 gold in my opinion. Next up, we've got the High Priest, not to be confused with the Low Priest. The first roll High Priest has 3 abilities. Heal, Abolish, just like his smaller friend, the Shadow Priest, but he also has Inner Fire, which allows him to get 5 armor and 10% damage. He also has 450 health, which is much easier to keep alive than Shadow Priest, though of course he's going to be vulnerable to things like Stormbolt and Ensnare, and you will lose a larger, more valuable unit when you lose him. He costs 305 gold, 40 wood, and takes up 40 supply, which is significant. But I feel like being able to offer Inner Fire to your heroes is going to be a very powerful mechanic that I really like to see. I would hire this guy relatively frequently with many different races. The cost is high, but that is a very valuable buff on a Demon Hunter, a Blade Master, a Mountain King, and a TC. I can't say that he'll be tier S because he's quite expensive and takes up 4 population and is a relatively easy target for that late in the game, but I will be putting him in tier A. That was the Dalaran. Let's go to the dungeon. This mercenary camp is also used for the underground tile set. Dungeon has the Burning Archer, Wildkin, Geomancer, and the Frost Revenant. Let's start with the beginning. Burning Archer. Where does Burning Archer go? Let's take a look. Burning Archer is a Searing Arrow endowed archer with just 300 health, 0 armor, 21 to 29 damage. Without using Searing Arrow, this is his attack speed, which is nothing too impressive. Searing adds 10 damage to that. He has only 300 health, and he has medium fast movement speed. Overall, I do think he offers a lot of damage. I think that's going to be his greatest asset. Let's check it out. The Burning Archer. Burning Archer. He has less sight range than others, only 1400. Normal units in the daytime have 1800. Movement speed 270, which is actually relatively slow. It's slower than a Tauren Chieftain, so he's easily caught. I believe this is the same as an Archer, taking a quick look. Archer is also 270. So he has Archer movement speed. He has an attack cooldown of 1.6. Archer has 1.5, so she's a little faster. He does a lot more damage than her, and he's only 2 supply, but he's very expensive. Almost double the price of an Archer with 225 against 130. So we've got a high damage, high cost, low supply unit that is slow and medium range. I'm not too impressed. He does have mana regeneration. He could eventually run out of mana, but I think he'll run out of life before he will run out of mana. I could see myself hiring this. I think it could be a B. It's also an undead mercenary, which means undead may be more likely to use him since they can coil him. But with 300 health, it's pretty hard to find. With 300 health and slow movement, it's pretty hard to see him not die relatively cost inefficiently. So I think this is a tier C unit at best, and I think that's being generous. It might also be a little critical, maybe he could be lower B. I would have to play with him and face him, but I don't think he's too good. Alright, next up, it's going to be the Wildkin. Same cost and supply as a Grunt. Doesn't cost any lumber, 3 pop, 5 gold less than a Grunt. Let's take a look. The Wildkin is a faster than a Grunt, 550 health, 2 armor, 19 to 22 damage. Attack speed is also pretty good. I can see myself getting this. At 195 gold, it's a very competitive price for his fast melee mover. If you compare him to the Centaur Outrunner, he's got 1 damage more than the Centaur Outrunner. They have the same health. And let's make them do a race. He never could beat his Centaur Outrunner brother, could he? I knew they were similar. They're pretty much the same stats. Go out, kid! One day he'll win. Yeah, I think nice voice lines. Overall, he's pretty similar to the Outrunner. A little slower, 1 damage more. He might differ a little bit more on the micro stats. He has the same cost. It's pretty much a reskin of a unit with small adjustments. I'm going to be putting him in tier B as well. The Outrunner is faster. Next up, Cobalt Geomancer. We already have him. We're not going to be putting a duplicate into the tier list. It's tier S. And then Frost Revenant. Cool. Frost Revenant has a Blizzard that does 15 damage. That's funny. So it looks like Blizzard from Archmage, but it's only 15 damage. And Blizzard Archmage is 75 damage, so it's really quite pathetic. He can only cast 2 of it. It's so bad. Dude, what is this? It's barely more than Disease Cloud. Area of effect, same as Blizzard. Range 800. Wave duration. Yeah, this just isn't good. I think the psychic damage of being hit by this is better. I can honestly say if anyone ever blizzards you from Frost Revenant, just don't move. The movement is not worth the dodge. So you're gonna get 2 blizzards, and then what? What then do you get from it? So he is actually a melee unit besides being able to do blizzard, so that makes him similar to the Pit Lord. Attack speed is quite fast. I think he has more DPS than a grunt. Same armor, less health. Kind of a strange unit. I don't think I would want to hire this. Even harassing workers with this, like workers repairing on a tower, 15 just isn't enough. I mean, it is just a unit, so it makes sense. 6 waves is 90 AoE damage. Maybe I'm underrating him a little bit. It also looks like he... Could he be an undead unit? Yeah, he's undead. So he can be coiled as well, which is a nice little bonus. He's slow at 270 movement speed. And he has slightly high melee attack range. At 255 gold, he's relatively expensive. I guess the fact that you've got a literal basic unit that has a area of effect damaging spell, of course it is going to be much worse than a hero. It's actually not that terrible when I think about it. Yes, compared to a hero it's weak, but compared to a Centaur Outrunner or this guy that applies 20 damage per unit, but he has to retarget to a new unit every time, whereas this guy hits all of them at the same time with 15 damage. Not applying his basic attack damage, but overall, I guess that's a pretty damn good DPS. Yeah, I'm actually kind of warming up to him. I would say Frost Revenant is actually a tier B unit. Would be fun to play this one in latter games. Alright, Frost Revenant, you've done it. You're tier B. Moving on. Felwood. We've got the Murloc Flesh Eater, the Spitting Spider, the Satyr Shadow Dancer, and Sludge Monstrosity. And before we go on to actually rate their capabilities, I think these are 4 of the most badass models and names for mercs that you can hire from any mercenary camp, and I need this in my game right now. Murloc Flesh Eater, 140 gold, 2 population. Let's check him out. So the Flesh Eater comes out with a Cannibalize spell that allows him to eat any corpse. Normally cannibalization, of course, is eating your own species' corpses. Otherwise it's called carnivorism, right? But he's going to be able to heal 12 hit points per second. He has only 13 to 14 damage, 1 armor, 400 health. Very similar to a ghoul in that he has cannibalize. 60 HP more than a ghoul. He's going to have less DPS than a frenzy ghoul, but perhaps more than a slow ghoul. And with a little bit more health and slightly higher purchasing cost, 140 against 120, Murloc Flesh Eater is a relatively competitive unit that self-sustains. I think this is a pretty neat purchase. I would put him either in tier B or C. I think this is a valid purchase. You can kind of creep with him and then you can heal himself up. I don't dislike him at all. I'm going to be putting him in tier... I can't rate him rightly together with the Wildkin, the Outrunner, the Revenant, and the Shadow Dancer. So he is going to be tier C. I think he's an okay addition sometimes, if you need a little bit of extra tempo and you like the self-sustaining capabilities. Not an impressive unit with high damage, but a decent addition at relatively low cost. Next up, Spitting Spider. 235 gold, 30 wood. Very similar to a Crypt Fiend or a Rifleman. Crypt Fiend being 215, but only being 2 population. That means Spitting Spider is a gold dense unit. Spitting Spider also has Venom, the same type as Assassin, so we'll be comparing the two of them. They have very similar health, 450 versus 400. The Rogue Assassin is actually a 3 population unit, and the Spider is only 2 population. 260 gold against 235 gold. Medium against heavy armor being better against melee. So the Spider is slightly better at shaking off wildkin damage, as you can see. You compare that to someone like the Assassin and you see that he's taking slightly more damage, but he also has a slightly higher health pool. With 25 to 32 damage, there's a slightly higher base damage on the Spitting Spider. I believe this also slows people. Or does it? No, it doesn't. I thought maybe it would slow, but it doesn't. It really is just damage. It's not Dryad slow poison, it's envenomed weapons. It comes at 600 range, which is actually even more than the Assassin. And while the Spitting Spider doesn't have Shadow Melt, the fact that it can do this from 600 range, that's pretty damn good, man. I like this one quite a lot. Would I put this in tier S? I think the fact that it doesn't have Shadow Melt means that it doesn't get to be in tier S. But I will say that it is sometimes better than the Assassin. Sometimes better than the Assassin. It's easier to hunt down. I think this is going to be the difference of whether it dies or not early game, because you tend to hire these during the first night and Shadow Melt is insane there. Is this tier S? It might be. Otherwise, it's the highest tier A. I don't rank them in order of, you know, if they're good to be on the left. I just do it in order that they are found. But I think you could make a case for either A or S. I would most likely hire this creep very often. Then you've got the Satyr Shadow Dancer, who we already previously put in tier B. And then the Sludge Monstrosity. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first huge unit we are going to be evaluating. At 4 population, 50 wood, and 320 gold. Alright, let's go check it out. Sludge Monstrosity. 600 health. It has slow. The same slow as Mud Golems. 25% attack rate, 60% movement, and it lasts 20 seconds. He has a mana pool of 400, which is more than the Mud Golem, and it's more than the Geomancer. With 1 armor, 24 to 27 damage, and a fast attack speed. And a sick attack animation. His face looks like Venom. And then he's got those cool tentacles whipping out. Movement speed is slow. I'm going to be taking a look at his exact stats. I'm fascinated. 270 movement speed makes him slow like an archer. His attack range is actually only 100 despite the tentacles. Relatively fast attack, decent damage. Overall, this is a unit that is extremely precious. It's costly. But because it's 4 population, while performing the same slow duty as other units, I feel like this is the weaker variant. As a melee unit, he's going to be on the front lines in order to fully make himself useful. And that means he's not so much as a unit with slow as the fact that he's just a grunt and a mud golem in 1. And at 4 population, 320 gold, I feel like that's a really high price to pay. I think his stats aren't that good for his cast. And while he's one of the coolest looking units, I'm actually not very likely to want to get this. Sludge Monstrosity comes out at 440 seconds into the game. You can bet you're behind that by that time. I'm not saying it's impossible, I don't think he's useless, but I cannot in good conscience rate him any higher than tier C. Alright, that was Felwood. Let's get to Icecrown Glacier. Icecrown Glacier brings us the Tuskar Healer, Ice Troll Berserker, the Blue Dragon Spawn Warrior, and the Unbroken Dark Weaver. Let's take a look at them. Here it is. You've got the Tuskar Healer. the Ice Troll Berserker, which is the same as the other Ice Trolls. Then you've got the Blue Dragon Spawn Warrior and the Unbroken Dark Weaver, which has Unholy Frenzy. Let's check them out. Alright, the Tuskar Healer is 215 gold, only 10 lumber and 2 population. That makes him a relatively expensive priest type unit, which is only 145 gold with 2 population. The Tuskar Healer has a heal ability, but also has a abolish magic ability, and that makes him very similar to the Troll Shadow Priest, so let's compare him to that. Tuskar Healer is a melee unit with a pretty slow attack speed, but he has the same toolkit as the Shadow Priest. Although he's melee, he's got medium armor, which actually makes him relatively similar to Mountain Giants and Spellbreakers, in that they have almost no range, but they are having the medium armor type. That makes them actually pretty strong against enemy piercing, against which they take reduced damage, but relatively weak against enemy melee. So if you're against grunts, footmen, ghouls, abominations, knights, it's very hard to use Tuskar Healer, as he'll be drawn to the front line because of his melee attack damage. And although his damage is high, I think it's not likely for him to ever really get this damage to apply. It is a strange armor damage type of kit to have for someone that's a healer and abolish magic. However, the functionality to be able to abolish and heal is still nice. And I think you'll control him very similarly to a Troll Shadow Priest, who you are also meant to keep in the back and not get focused. With the Troll Shadow Priest, you don't run when you start getting hit. You run before you start getting hit. And then you do an abolish, and you run away, etc. It'll be the same with the Tuskar Healer. And in fact, he is tankier against enemy piercing attacks. Someone does an archer salvo on a priest and it's pretty much dead because it takes full damage. This one takes less. So while the damage cannot be applied that effectively, you could say the same kind of is true for Forest Troll Shadow Priest. And either one of them doing an attack move generally means that they're just going to be stuck in healing animation wherever they first started healing. So I would argue the damage ain't that important. Then when it comes to the cost, he's slightly more expensive than the priest, but because he's more survivable, I actually kind of like him. I think this is actually kind of a good unit. And so the Tuskar Healer gets my seal of approval and will be going to the same place that the Shadow Priest will be going to, which is going to be tier A. Then we get to the Ice Troll Berserker, which we've already previously grouped. No, we haven't. Wait, hold on. Is this not the same guy? Oh, it is the same guy. Different icon, different tile set, exact same kit as the Forest Troll. This guy, we can put him there as well. They're all tier A. They have good damage, the exact same cost, good DPS output, decent range with 500. I like them quite a lot. And then we get to the Blue Dragon Spawn Warrior. He's really quite fast, as you can see. Bipedalism. No, quadrupedalism. Not bipedalism. Quadrupedalism is a feat that I hope to attain sometime, no pun intended. Quite fast, very exciting unit, 775 health, pretty good damage with a fast attack speed. With a very slow wind up of his first attack, but once he gets going, he really keeps going. Cool looking animation of his attack as well. He's a large unit, and he has evasion as well, in addition to his rather large health pool. So he's got much more effective health than a grunt, and probably more effective health than an ogre mauler as well in the physical department. Though I think it's a pretty close toss-up actually. Yeah, I'm gonna say it's actually quite similar. 15% evasion, only 6% extra effective health via armor. This is 18% effective health via armor. Yeah, okay, pretty comparable to a ogre mauler. Let's compare the cost and other stats. So the Blue Dragon Spawn Warrior has the same cost as an ogre mauler. Ogre mauler is also 4 population, so they're really quite comparable. He has a 1400 sight range, which I guess is something all mercenaries actually have. I didn't realize that. So all mercs are worse by themselves in terms of getting vision. Movement speed is 300, which is actually faster than the ogre mauler. The footprint is a collision size of 32, smaller than an ogre mauler. and then his damage speed is 1.35 on the attack cooldown and the same damage. So a very comparable unit to the Mauler, but because he's faster as a melee unit, I feel like that's very valuable. So no matter what, he's going to be higher than the Mauler. I'm going to be putting that guy in tier A. I think that's a super solid kit to have. Very tanky dude, fast, good damage, pretty good attack speed, easy to keep alive because of his large health. I like him quite a bit. Alright, let's get to the last unit of this Merc Camp, the Unbroken Darkweaver. Also with 4 population, 50 lumber cost, 320 gold. It is going to be the same price as the Sludge Monstrosity, which we put in tier C. Let's see if he's any better. Unbroken Darkweaver has the same health and half the mana pool, the same armor and the same damage. But instead of having slow, he comes out with the Unholy Frenzy, which boosts attack rate by 75% for 45 seconds, which also has a downside of draining health. That makes someone attack very fast, which is pretty damn cool. You can put that on heroes. I think that's a super powerful thing to do, especially because you don't need to pay the prerequisite cost for getting the technology that would otherwise get this. Most undead players do not buy a temple, they do not buy a necromancer, and when they do not get the adept upgrade for necromancer in order to unlock Unholy Frenzy. If you could hire an Unholy Frenzy necromancer as an undead player from your Black Citadel without any prerequisite techs and upgrades, you would 100% do that because you would have an insane damage on your Lich. Lich, Firelord, Blade, Demon, these are some of the best heroes to be able to make use of Unholy Frenzy. And the Unbroken Darkweaver can offer that. Now, it is coming at a large cost. 320 gold and 4 population makes this not a small inclusion into your army. And because he's melee, he's going to be more often dying in fights than someone with the same population at the back of a fight. Nonetheless, semi-relatively tanky. His movement speed is actually very fast. Holy crap, how fast is that? The Unbroken Darkweaver has a movement speed of 300, which is faster than a baseline Tauren Chieftain and slightly slower than a Demon Hunter. He is not classified as an undead, so he can't be coiled. Would I get this as an Orc player? At 320 gold and 4 pop, the question would be, would I get this to pay a bit extra instead of a Kodo Beast? A Kodo Beast is slower but can eat a unit and gives 10% damage to the entire army. This guy gives 75% attack speed, but if you know how attack speed works in Warcraft 3, that's not actually a 75% DPS increase. There is a baseline attack speed for every unit and hero in the game, and the baseline attack speed for a hero has already been amplified into the visible attack speed that you see by the agility that they have and any other attack speed modifiers, and the 75 will be added to that. If you take a 20 agility hero, that already is 40% attack speed on the base amount. That 40% is added to this 75% for a total of 115% on the base amount. So the realistic increase of 75% attack rate is probably only a DPS increase of something like 50-55% or so. As such, would you want a 50% damage increase on your Blade Master and maybe 1 or 2 other units? Or would you want a Kodo Drums damage increase on everything? Well, I say, why not both? I don't know if I could fit in Unbroken Darkweaver in a 40 population army, but would I fit it into a 60 population army? I would say definitely yes. Now, of course, Frenzy Blade is going to be countered by the same ways that he already gets countered in general. People are going to slow him, bolt him, Frost Nova, kite him and snare him, etc., curse him. So obviously putting all your eggs in one basket like that, not going to be as good. Would I use Unbroken Darkweaver just to boost 3-4 Headhunters? Again, I don't think that's super worth it. I could put it on a Farseer and a Shadowhunter, which is decent. Overall, I do think it's kind of debatable whether I would want to use this at all. I'm kind of stumped here. I think this is an exciting unit, but I don't think I could put it in tier S for sure. Is it a tier A or a B is my biggest question right now. I think potentially it could be very strong. It could be a B or a C. A B or an A. He becomes available at 440 seconds, which is 7 minutes and 20 seconds. I say B. I think I'm inclined to agree with that. It is a pretty exciting unit, but it's got some pretty clear counters. You wouldn't get this if you're against destroyers. Yeah, I think it's a B for sure. I feel pretty confident with that. Think realistic, not idealistic. Anytime I use this against undead, they got destroyers. He dies fast to destroyers, he doesn't do anything against them, and his buff gets dispelled. Yeah, it's B. Alright, next up, we go to the next creep camp. We're going to be seeing the Gnoll Brute in Lordaeron Fall. Gnoll Brute, Gnoll Warden, Mud Golem, and Ogre Magi. I'm pretty familiar with these units, so this should be pretty easy. The Gnoll Brute is a 140 gold cost, which makes him similar to a footman, and at 2 population he's very comparable to a footman. He's got slightly more damage, 1 armor. I think he's very similar to a unit we've already seen, namely the Rogue. It's pretty much 1-to-1 with the Rogue, as you can see. This unit is shit. I've always regretted hiring them on any of the fun maps that I've tried them. There's just no reason really to hire such a weak unit that cannot upgrade and scale into the game. This is utterly useless, you should never buy this. And unlike the Rogue, he can't even Shadow Melt. I'm assuming he's got some advantages over the Rogue. I think I detect that he's slightly faster.
Should I mess someone up?
But not by any meaningful amount. This is definitely another lovely tier D. Gnoll only exists to be killed. I would go so far as to say the only good Gnoll is a dead Gnoll. And I know many of my World of Warcraft brothers would agree with this. Next up. The Gnoll Warden. The Gnoll Warden. Gnoll Warden has Perch, which is pretty cool. You can use this on units to slow them down for a bit. Of course, the stags here are considered to be allies, so it doesn't work on them. It removes buffs, so it's a form of Dispel. But unlike Abolish, which only removes enemy debuffs on you and enemy buffs on them, Perch is indiscriminate, so it has some downsides. But then the upside is that it has a decaying slow that starts at near 100% and then slowly allows someone to regain their movement speed. It's pretty cool. At 300 mana, you can cast it several times. Then you've got pretty high damage at the 500 range with piercing, with a medium attack speed and a medium to high movement speed. I think the Gnoll Warden is useful. At just 2 population, I gotta admit, I thought this was gonna be a 3 population, 195 gold. I like this quite a lot. I think this is good. You can remove Water Elegiggles, you can remove Feral Spirits, and Tangle. I would definitely hire this. He's even cheaper than a Shadow Priest, and I feel like Dispel is the most important component. And then he has more health than a Shadow Priest. Yeah, I like him quite a bit. Gnoll Warden for me is a clear tier A. You should definitely get this pretty often. I'm gonna be putting him over here. Then you've got the Mud Golem. Mud Golem is insane. Mud Golem. Elves like to get this in the late game to stop siege engines, as slow works against siege engines and elves don't have another way to reduce their damage output. Usually if you're defending against mass tanks, you're going to go Mud Golem, you're going to get maybe a couple of talents with Fairy Fire to kill them more easily, and you're going to make Nature's Blessing and a couple of Ancients of War to defend your bases. Mud Golem is a great hot pickup at mercenary camps, very early on available in the game and able to slow opponents. At a low price of 145, he comes out, he's magic immune so he can't be hexed. His movement speed is very slow at just 240, that's one of the slowest in the game, the same as a Demolisher, but the slow casting range is really quite high at 600. This is a key unit that has great situational use. You're not always gonna get it. I would say normally I would put a unit that he is with the frequency of you wanting to hire him in tier B, because I don't consider him to be like game breaking. You're always going to get him and then you're going to win because of him. And I don't think that you get him that often. Normally when I look at tier A, I would say you get these almost all the time. And that's true pretty much for almost the entire list. That you pretty much see them in a game when they're available. I would put them normally in tier B, but because he's so good with what he does that he comes out that early with slow, he is actually a tier A unit as well. That's how good that is to get slow that early before other forms of CC become available. Then you've got the Ogre Mage, Ogre Magi, because it's 2 people, 2 heads, they them. 320 gold, 50 lumber, 4 food, That's expensive and comparable to the Unbroken Dark Weaver. He's going to have very similar stats to the Dragon Spawn that we saw earlier and the Sludge Monstrosity. Same stats, right? Same armor, same health, less mana, different buff. Same as the Monstrosity. We placed those guys in tier C and B, I believe. Bloodlust is pretty nice. I think Bloodlust, in a way, it's better than Frenzy because it gives movement speed, and that's very valuable. It's 25% bonus movement speed. I think that's better than Frenzy because it has purposes outside of fights, right? You can get to places faster. So I think Ogre Magi is quite good. Better than the Unbroken Dark Weaver. The Dark Weaver is in tier B. I think the Magi is going to be in tier A most likely. I think movement speed is very, very valuable. But it is low tier A. It could be high B. I'm going to say tier A as well. I think this is a pretty common one to buy unit most likely. Yeah, they are quite good. They are quite good. Next up, we've got the Lordaeron Summer. This camp is the main mercenary camp. Every single melee one-on-one map is balanced around. Deviations from Lordaeron Summer are rare. And I guess part of the question in this video, should it be less rare? Should we see some of the others? As a pro gamer, I fought against any mer camp that isn't Lordaeron Summer. And in fact, I even find Lordaeron Summer a little polarizing because Forest Troll Shadow Priest in particular is a really big perpetrator of imbalance sometimes, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. It can be quite a big difference whether humans have this available against Farseer and it pretty much just shuts down a hero. It feels pretty strong. So I don't need to test them in the game. I know the value of these units. The Troll Shadow Priest is very, very good. He's going to be tier S together with the Geomancer. Actually, I rated the Tuskar over here. I think this might actually be wrong. I'm going to be putting both of them in tier S. Getting Abolish out that early, that's got to be a tier S. Both of them pretty much have the same kit. I think they deserve to be here. They're pretty game-changing with the Dispel that they have that early. The Berserker is going to be over here. The Mauler is just a strong dude. I think Mauler actually ain't that good. We hire him sometimes in a surge of passion, but I feel like he's usually not worth what you pay for it. Maybe it's B, maybe it's C. Let's see. 4 population, through 850 health. He's a little weaker than a Grunt, in my opinion. He does have more effective health. Yeah, C or B. I'm going to put him in B. I think he's not that bad. Not that bad. All right. Then, next up, the Lordaeron Winter. So we've got the Ice Troll Priest, the Ice Troll Berserker, the Mud Golem, and the Ogre Mauler. A lot of repeats. It is, after all, just Winter. On a side note, these units all have different AI for some reason. Like, if you fight against them as a creep, not as a mercenary camp, they tend to focus different units. This is pretty annoying. I don't know why it works like this. But although they look the same in terms of stats, they really aren't. This Dark Troll Shadow Priest that we started with and this Ice Troll Priest are the same. They don't have Dispel, they just have the heal. Then you've got the Ice Troll Berserker, which is the same as this Ice Troll Berserker, Mud Golem, Ogre Mauler. So we pretty much covered all of these. We're gonna move on to the next biome. Northrend, Nerubian Warrior, 205 gold, 2 population. Let's check him out. Nerubian Warrior is a bad unit. Wait, hold on a second. Why is Nerubian Warrior 2 population? Wait, I guess they all are, right? But why is he 205 gold? All right, we need to go discover. He pretty much has Null Brute stats, but then he costs 205. Why? All right, we gotta see. Same health. He's got the same health, but costs 65 gold more. His movement speed is 50 faster than the Null Brute. Spawns units on death? What do you mean? No, he doesn't, right? Oh yeah, he does. Wait, hold on. It says spawn spiderlings. We need to test this. We're gonna kill our first unit this tier list. So anyway, he's 50 movement speed faster, and the damage and the range is the same, and the DPS. Okay. All right, let's check it out. I'm sorry, but we have to test this. Ah!
What's done is done.
And then we get the spiderlings. What's done is done. Okay. So we get 2 spiderlings. Oh, now I see. Well, that's kind of cool. That's the only death rattle unit that I know of. And they have an infinite life.
Yes, master.
So he's melee, he's very fast, and then he has a death rattle.
Be drained of life,
That's kind of neat.
master. The time is now.
Yeah, and he has 210 health, the 2 spiderlings. That's definitely the best version of this unit. So he spawns spiderlings. Spiderlings have 240 health each. Their movement speed is 270, which is a little slower, 10 to 11 damage. It does give more experience, of course. These are level 1, which means they will give very little XP. Yeah, not bad. I like it. I like it. And that's quite good. I would sooner get this than the Null Brute. The Null Brute are tier D. Gonna be putting the Nerubian at tier B then. C or B? C. Tier C. I don't think it's a B, because you're still feeding experience for a relatively easy to kill unit. Nerubian Warrior, you've done it. You are sometimes allowed to be hired. Then we've got the Berserker and the Frost Revenant. We've seen them, but let's check out this new unit, the Nerubian Seer.
Make your choice.
It has an autocast Raise Dead, like a Necromancer, 600 health, a lot of damage, 30 to 36 piercing damage,
For the spider.
with an attack speed that's pretty fast. It says average, but it's on the higher end of average. And then it also has Abolish. It looks huge as well. 1 armor, 600 health. Let's take a look at some of the stats. It has the same cast as the other chunkies that have a spell, like Ogre Magi and the Dragon Spawn. No, not the Dragon Spawn, the Unbroken Dark Weaver. But I like its kit a lot. With Dispel, Range, and Summoning, this is great. Nerubian Seer is also fast, same speed as a Demon Hunter without boots of speed, 320. It's large, 1.6 attack speed, Abolish Magic, and Raise Dead. Makes normal skeleton warriors. Yeah, I like this one quite a lot. I think this is the best large spellcaster that we've seen. We ranked some of them in tier B, some in tier A. I think this might be a tier S actually. This is sick. It's either S or A. It's also happening to be summoning undead skeletons, which can be dark ritualed, but the unit itself is not undead. So he cannot be coiled. I think it's either S or A. I think this is a very cool unit. Dispel is very strong. As you can see, 4 of the units that are here have Dispel. And I like his secondary spell quite a lot. Oh, sorry, I accidentally showed my merch, which was not meant to be shown. My bad. Let's get back to the tier list. That was Northrend. Let's get to Outland. Outland has the Draenei Disciple. Why do I say Disciple again? I know what it's called. It has the Draenei Disciple, Bloodfiend, Voidwalker, and Skeletal Orc Grunt. I like this tile set quite a bit, and these are pretty interesting units. Let's take a look. 195 gold, 2 pop, 10 wood, 240 gold, no wood, so like a Grunt then. This is similar cost to a Crypt Fiend, 30 gold more but 1 population less. And then you've got the Skeletal Orc Grunt, which has similar stats to the Ogre Mauler. 300 gold, no wood, 4 food is like the Mauler. So let's check them out. Pretty comparable numbers to some of the units here. And what do they do? So you've got the Draenei Disciple, 280 health, pretty handsome. 0 armor, medium, 22 to 26.
Do my best. For Draenor.
For Draenor! Slow attack speed, pretty large range. He has a heal. His cost was 195 gold, which makes him the same as the Troll Shadow Priest. But he doesn't have Dispel. Does have significantly more damage though. But with his low health pool, it's pretty hard to use this one very effectively. I think he's an okay inclusion. This is going to be like a low B or a C. I'm going to be putting him in tier C because no Dispel. Then we've got Bloodfiend. What a name. Chaos damage. Full damage to all armor types. This is mostly an advantage, but not necessarily. The way you should see chaos damage, on average, is that it is quite good against buildings and heroes. Chaos means that it will always do 100% of its advertised damage, but then will be mitigated by armor amount. So, whereas normal damage will do bonus damage to medium, which Icecrown Berserker has, which makes a Grunt good against a Berserker in terms of damage output, Chaos will still just do 100%, not 150. Normal, in fact, does full damage on almost everything except on Fortified and Hero. And that's why I say Chaos is better against Fortified, like buildings, and against heroes. However, it is going to be weaker against medium if you're expecting normal damage. So, slightly higher damage than a grunt, even after brute strength upgrade, with almost half the health of a grunt. Not a good look. Same armor, but he has cleaving attack. And that's pretty cool. 25% cleaving with how not tanky he is actually not that impressive. Died like the rat he is. Bloodfiend is 240 gold, 2 population. The cleave really isn't gonna really play a big role. It's not easy to keep a 450 melee unit alive. Does that mean that therefore necessarily he's bad? I mean, his stats are alright. Nah, I think he's too expensive. He's way too low health. He sucks. He's slow, therefore hard to catch people. The cleave is low. Nah, this guy sucks. Yeah, I just think it's a D or a C. I think you do hire this guy when you're facing siege engines, and you would rather hire him than these chaps. I'm gonna put him in C because of his damage type. Extremely situational. I want you guys to know he's the bottom of tier C. Get Bloodfiend when you're facing siege engines or engaged in an elimination battle and you don't have raiders. But almost never get him. Maybe he should be a D. Nah, screw it. He's a D. But he... No. Alright, we'll keep him in C. We'll keep him in C. But it's super low C. Moving on. Voidwalker. 245 gold, 30 wood, and 2 population. Right? Let's check him out. Voidwalker has the cold arrows. With a ranged attack of just 450, he can't do this from very far away. But that's quite a useful ability. Cold arrows will do a slow on people. And all slow, by the way, in Warcraft 3 is the same as all other slow. There's only one type of cold slow. So it's going to be the same type of slow as Frost Arrow, Frost Nova, Nerubian, Frost Armor, etc. Black Citadel, Nerubian Tower. And then it adds damage. The movement speed, minus 25. That's going to be reduced attack rate as well. So he essentially has Frost Orb, which is quite good. How much damage does it do, if any? Oh, adds bonus cold damage, but it doesn't say how much. Duration. Oh. 0.25 bonus damage. Nice. Very nice. Very nice. And what is the range? So the range is 700. And what that means is that when Voidwalker does a normal right click with a left click, like this, then he's going to be doing it from short range. But if you press C, then he can do it from very far away. So that I didn't know that actually. So this is me doing a right click, and this is me doing C click. Oh shit, that's pretty sick. So he's an extremely microable unit. If you care to try. Oh my god, wow, we just learned something insane. But you have to press C left click. If you right click, it's like this. Interesting. This is right click, can barely catch up, but this is C click. Here we go, C. See? So that's really strong. And his cast was 245 gold, 30 wood. Yeah, I think this is very strong. This is so cool, actually. I love this. Yeah, that's gonna be tier A or better. I'm gonna put it in tier A. It doesn't quite have the swinging power of an early game Dispel, but being able to do that from 700 range makes him extremely unique. That's a tier A for me for sure. It comes out 7 minute 30 in the game. Maybe it's a tier S actually. Nah, that's a Frost Orb. That's a tier S. Yeah, I think this is going to be very frustrating to play against. It's a Naga Sea Witch from really big range as a creep. Very good. You add this to your army, and is his health enough to stay alive? 365. Not the best, I suppose. But he can do everything from such a large range.
Yes, my lord.
With 365 health. Yeah, I like it quite a lot. Alright, cool. Let's check out the Skeletal Orc Grunt. 25 health more than a upgraded Grunt. which will have 8 to 25. 2 armor more, which means his effective health is 1007 or something against physical. And then he's got the same damage, but let's check out his micro stats. Let's compare him to an Ogre Mauler. Skeletal Orc Run. Now I know he's undead, which means he's coilable, but he's not. But that also means he's holy lightable. Alright, Skeletal Orc Grunt and the Mauler. Damage comparison. 24, 27. Same range, same cooldown, so they have the exact same DPS. The movement speed is the same at 270. Collision size, the Mauler's bigger, so he's a little smaller. They come out at the same time, first daylight. Vision is actually tiny. He's blind as a bat. Both his night and his day vision is tiny. 800. With 600 at night. That's so funny. His level is 5, so he gives the same XP as an Ogre Mauler. Well, I don't know what to think of this guy. I think he really is just quite similar to the Mauler. He's going to be a tier B unit then. Slightly worse at harassing by himself. He doesn't sleep, yeah, but I mean, we're rating them here as hireable mercs. I think that's okay. I like this quite a bit because he cannot be coiled. But then, of course, he's going to be pretty weak against destroyers. I probably wouldn't hire him in the late game, actually. I could see both of these not being tier B, but I'm not going to change this anymore. Like, they're okay extra buffer into your army. Worse than all of these, to be sure, but better than those. Yep. Alright. Next up. Sunken Ruins. The Murgle Bloodgill. 195. Alright, this guy looks like the Troll Shadow Priest, some kind of semi-reskin. And sure enough, he's got heal, more health, but no abolish. That makes him quite a bit worse than the Shadow Priest. It's kind of like this guy. He's got a bit more health, which is cool. But it's going to be a tier C unit as well. No Dispel. Does have 2 armor, does have 300 health, but is overall still pretty fragile. And without Dispel, it's really not that exciting. He's similar to the Troll Priest. Slightly tankier, same cast. Yeah, I guess he is slightly better than that, but he's still just a small heal bot. I would get him sometimes, but he can't really fight. That's the problem. The 2 armor does not make him able to really fight very well. I would get him sometimes, though. Maybe he could even be a B. Is the fact that he has 300 health and 2 armor good enough for him to be a healing bot in tier B? Maybe? Maybe his extra tankiness actually qualifies him to be there. It's probably a C, because he can't fight that well. Alright, next up. The Storm Reaver Hermit. At 190 gold and 20 wood, 2 population. What does he bring us? Purge. Amazing. Amazing. Now, don't we already rate this guy? Not quite, right? It's similar to... Who was the other guy? Oh, the Gnoll. The Gnoll Warden has Purge. So he's got 10 health more than the Gnoll Warden, 2 armor more. He's got 4 max damage less, so 2 damage less on average. 100 mana less. Purge is very nice. It's Lockdown and Dispel. I put the Gnoll Warden in tier A, which I guess really is debatable. If Gnoll Warden is tier A, then so is this Storm Reaver. Gnoll can do Purge more often with 300 mana pool, which is more important than the 2 armor. Keep in mind that this is 2 armor on a very small health pool, so it really doesn't make a large difference. Instead of 340, it's like 380 effective health. In terms of the cost, Storm Reaver guy is 190 gold and the Warden is 180, so he costs 10 gold more as well. It's small differences. I'm going to be putting them in the same list, which is tier A. It's really nice to be able to get a Dispel for such a small cost. He's slightly tankier, but he doesn't purge as often. That's still better than tier B because he has a Dispel and a slow in the lockdown. Are all these creeps or only those that are purchasable? We're only looking at purchasable units here. And this is not even a full mercenary tier list because there are some mercs you can hire on some maps that are not in this list. Next up, we got the Murgle Snarecaster. 265 gold, 30 wood, and 3 population. The Murgle Snarecaster has slow and abolish. You guys know how I feel about that. That's like the Geomancer. 75 health more, 2 armor more, same spells, same mana, 75 health more. The Murgle Snarecaster is even better than the Kobold Geomancer. Significantly more tanky by at least 33%. Has more damage, same pool and the same spells. Really good damage. That's insane. And while he is more expensive at 265, he's only 50 gold more expensive in one population. I think Snarecaster is even better than Geomancer. I think he's tier S+. It's our first tier S+, but I don't have a category, so he's going to be sharing room with the plebs. Great unit. I'll definitely make sure to get this guy anytime I play an FFA or a 4-on-4 game. Next up, we've got the Skeletal Orc Grunt, who we already covered. Then we go to the next tile set. We finish Sunken Ruins, and we go to Village. Village starts with a Kobold Tunneler, which has a footman-like price. It's similar to the Nullbrood and the Rogue. And those were very uninteresting units. It's slightly more expensive at 150 gold and 2 population, no lumber. But it has bash! It has bash!
I'll check it out.
That's insane, dude!
Sure, I'll check it out.
That's a really long stun. You can cancel channels, you can lock down things, and while he is easy to kill with medium armor, 325 health, just being able to stun for just 140 gold, that is very, very good. That's a 2-second stun. Kobold Tunneler, a 2-second stun that also deals 25 bonus damage. 15% chance. I like this a lot, but where should I place him? Is that tier S or A? I think it's a tier S because he dies easily. And bash has a chance. There is a chance that you bash, there's a chance that you don't. This guy could come in and do 6 auto attacks and not get a bash. Or he could bash on the first. Whereas all the tier S units are so reliable that you will get poison off, you will dispel in slow, you will dispel, etc. But this guy may not do what he needs to do, and he does it from melee range. I could almost see him at tier B, but because he's so cheap, I really do think you'll add him in and get some good results from him. I think it's an A. You guys are saying B. I'm going out on a limb here, saying tier A. Next up, we've got the Rogue Assassin again. We've already rated him, as we did with the Geomancer. And then the final unit, Kobold Taskmaster. Kobold Taskmaster has a command aura that gives 10% bonus damage. This used to be a separate aura from Kodo War Drums, which means that if you ever found command aura, you could stack it with Kodo damage. But this was nerfed. Nowadays, it's the same. But that's still 10% damage bonus. Very good. He has 650 health, 3 armor, a pretty high cost, more expensive than a Kodo while offering the same thing. Has less health by 350, but has 3 more armor. And a better armor type with heavy than unarmored for the most part. The Kobold Taskmaster I think is a pretty good inclusion into many armies, but he will need to be microed. He also has bash. Not easy for you to want to commit him to the heavy front lines to try and get bash, but overall I do think that's quite good. Where would I rate him? I think that's a tier A as well. It's either A or B. I think it's an A. 10% damage bonus is not something a lot of people have access to. If you're an undead and you're at 60 population, I think you could definitely add this to a fiend army. Aura stacking is very valuable, and then he has bash in case you close in on him. Should you send him by himself to try and go bash people in the back? Nah, you hold him back a bit. But anyone that does move on you, like a blade, could get bashed, and then you can set him up for a Coil Nova Silence. It's insane. He will die easily, and that's why you need to be careful with him. But if you are, I think it's very valuable, tier A. Then finally we get to the Shredder, the Sapper, and the Zeppelin. Zeppelin was recently nerfed, and I mean really recently, as in 2024. He used to be 0 population, now he's 1. And I know its stats by heart, I don't need to look it up. 240 gold, 60 lumber, now 1 population. You can house up to 8 units or 2 very large units via mountain giants. The Zeppelin is an aerial transportation like no other. Hireable at the Goblin Laboratory, available at First Daylight. This is a tier S unit. There's nothing like it in the game. It opens up complete strategies. It's insane. You use Zeppelin to save peasants from Fan of Knives Warden Harass. You use it to do bear drops in Night of Mirror. You use it to drop Farseer TC Raider in the back of a human base to kill peasants. This is tier S++++++. You should be hiring more of these than you ever do. And the nerf was fair. For 1 population, still very good. You can even use it in micro, in battles, in 50 versus 50 fights, to save units that are getting focus fire. literally making fiend shots that are mid-air miss and then dropping the unit out again. So sick. Goblin Shredder, very polarizing unit. 375 gold, 100 lumber, 4 population. Has the same population as 4 peasants. Has the DPS of 1,000,000 peasants. 600 or so health, I think 600. Works as fast as about 10 peasants. I would need to check and research this, and maybe I will someday. But when you get Shredder, even if you have no other workers, you will never need lumber again after a few minutes. He can be repaired. He has something like 34 to 64 damage. Very insane unit. Goblin Shredder should not be hired if you are on your standard starting lumber count on 1 base. Standard starting lumber count is 3 ghouls for undead, 7 peons for orc, 9 wisps for night elf, and 8 to 9 peasants for human. If you still have that and you're still on 1 base, you don't hire a Shredder. Though I've seen some Bronze League heroes do it, but who would you rather believe, Bronze or me? But if you've lost anywhere from 2 to 5 workers, it's better to replace with a Shredder than with new workers. It is a large upfront cost, but lumber will be solved forever, and then you can use your workers for other things, like walking to an expansion. Also, if you expand, you may be bringing 5 wisps / peon / peasant from your main to your expansion, and then you will want to replace lumber workers, and it's better to do so with a Shredder. And you can afford it because of the new income from the expansion. Shredder is insane. I even had a attack strategy once with Goblin Shredder. In Orc versus Night Elf on Terranus Stand, I would do Blade, 5 grunts, and get both Shredders at the same time, and rush them with it. This is when Elf was teching to tier 3 with 1 Demon, 1 Archer, and 1 Beast. It still only worked 30% of the time. These 7 units were not enough to kill 1 Archer and 2 Heroes. But it worked sometimes, and that was good enough for me. Shredder is a powerful unit that you don't get every time, but when you do get it, it can literally win you games. It's a tier A for show. I'm not saying it's always game winning like tier S, but it's an A. I think Shredder should be nerfed. It should go from 4 to 2 pop. It should do half as much lumber, not be as polarizing of a unit, lower stats, etc. It's a bit too easy to get the Shredder and fix all your lumber problems. Then finally, Goblin Sapper. 215 gold, 100 lumber, 100 health, blows up for 500 siege damage. 3 of these will blow up a Great Hall, 2 of these will blow up a Tree of Life without Nature's Blessing, 1 of these will put Moonwells on a single hit away from dying, and they will blow up farms. The Sappers used to be able to speed scroll, which was very fun, and a reason for a lot of victories in 2005 to 2010 against Undead. You would go to their laboratory, you would hire a Sapper, you would speed scroll it, make them max movement speed, and then you would go on 2 cigarettes, and then you would hit each cigarette once with a blade and a grunt, and then they die, and that was so much fun. And then you went to kill the acolytes, and then you won the game. But they removed the ability to speed scroll them. You can no longer load them into zeppelins. You cannot invisible them anymore, but you can bloodlust them. You can curse them, doesn't do anything though. You can lightning shield them. You can inner fire them. You can heal them, but you can't mess with their visibility or mobility anymore for the most part, except for bloodlust and endurance aura. Sappers are a cool key unit that are really, I think, cool design in that if an opponent reacts to it, they're very easy to kill, but if they get to do their work, they can be really quite strong. I like Sappers, and I think they're designed well and have a good place in the game. You don't get them every game, you don't even get them every other game. But overall, they're pretty good. I'm going to rate them tier B. They can be quite key. So yeah, that's where the Goblin Sapper is going to be. We've got a couple of units missing here, but we're headed near the 2 hours. So I'm glad we don't have every unit that exists in the game that can possibly be hired from the Merc camps. These are the standard Merc camps, not the Dragon Roost, which is a different type of mercenary production building, not the usual mercenary camp, right? So yeah, this is my mercenary tier list. Which units would you most like to see in a 1v1 melee map, like on W3 Champions or BattleNet Ladder? Which ones do you think would be fun to play with? I'd like to see Sludge Monstrosity, and maybe not some of the strongest tier S. I think Sludge Monstrosity, this guy with Frenzy would be fun. The Fairy Fire Harpy will be quite interesting. And maybe this guy, the Spider Spitter. Oh, it's very strong. Very strong as well. Alright, that was my Merc tier list. Hope you enjoyed this. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.